Brain and happiness, the paradox that can change your life. Why does our brain not seek happiness, but rather the familiar? It sounds like a paradox. We read self-help books, practice meditation, rethink our priorities, all dreaming of greater peace, joy, and ease. Yet after days, weeks, sometimes just hours, we fall back into old patterns, anxiety, self-criticism, familiar dramas. Why? The answer isn't in willpower, motivation, or character. The answer is in the brain. The brain is a prediction organ, not a pleasure-seeking machine. Its primary mission isn't to make us happy, but to keep us alive. For the brain, survival doesn't mean pleasure. It means familiarity. Even if that familiarity is chronic anxiety, loneliness, or resentment. Familiar means controllable. Controllable means safe. At least, that's what the ancient part of us believes, the part shaped millions of years ago, when any strange noise could be a lion hiding in the bushes. Neuroscience professor Carla Sinead once emphasized in a lecture at Hartford University, "We did not evolve to be happy. We evolved to be cautious." Deep inside our brains lives this ancient sentinel, the amygdala, scanning the surroundings for threats. And it fires more often than necessary. Better safe than sorry. This system worked perfectly in the Paleolithic era, but today it imprisons us within our own neural scripts. We fall in love with those who hurt us because it echoes childhood attachments. We choose jobs that exhaust us because deep down we believe joy must be earned. We seek out what destroys us because destruction feels familiar. In one study at the University of California, San Francisco, participants underwent MRI scans while shown positive and negative emotional scenes. Fascinatingly, those who grew up in unstable or traumatic conditions showed stronger brain activation to negative images than to positive ones. Even more striking, areas associated with comfort and recognition lit up when negative images appeared. It was as if the brain was saying, "Oh, I know this. This is mine." That's why the familiar often outshines the desired. One man, after a painful divorce, repeatedly entered relationships with emotionally distant partners. He suffered but couldn't stop. Therapy revealed that his mother had been cold and unpredictable. His brain sought not love in new women, but a pattern. Because the pattern is safe, predictable. Predictability gives the illusion of control, and control the illusion of survival. The philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer wrote, "We are not free in our choice. We are free only in our desire to choose." Indeed, before we realize a thought, the brain has already delivered an emotional reaction based on past experience. We are like actors performing a play we did not write, yet over time we can rewrite the script. This requires attention, practice, and above all, honesty with oneself. The first step is to recognize the familiar. When you notice yourself in the same situation again, arguing with a loved one, avoiding a chance, punishing yourself with criticism, ask, "Is this familiar to me? Was this how I grew up?" Maybe it's not coincidence, but automatic behavior. The second step is to slow down. Our brain is like a river. If you don't build dams, it flows along its well-worn path. Slowing down is the key to awareness. At moments of strong emotion, place your hand on your chest and simply say, "I'm here with you. We will get through this." This simple phrase activates the care system, the mammalian brain, and reduces stress. Neuropsychologist Rick Hansen states, "We can train the brain to be happier if we create new neural pathways." To do this, we must not only notice the good, but linger in it. He recommends an exercise. Every day, find at least one pleasant sensation, a taste, a smell, a smile, music, and stay with it for at least 15 seconds. This forms new memory, a new response. But, and this is crucial, the brain doesn't rewire from one exercise. It rewires through repetition, through new familiarity, by choosing not to seek pain, but to seek light, and allowing yourself to stay in it. If this topic fascinates you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, share this video with your friends, and leave your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your experience with the familiar and the new. He walked down the dark alley, listening to his footsteps. This was no mere walk. It was a ritual. Every night, at the same hour, Frederick, a patient of a German psychotherapist, retraced an old route past a ruined kindergarten where he had once experienced trauma. He didn't know why he kept doing it, but he couldn't stop. His brain, like a conductor of an unconscious orchestra, pulled him toward the familiar, even when that familiar brought pain. We often don't seek what makes us happy, but what feels recognizable. This is one of the mind's most cunning traps. Our brain is less a navigator toward happiness and more a survival system, shaped by millions of years of evolution. It doesn't care if you feel joy, it cares that you survive, and survival is easier in an environment you know, even if toxic. Rutgers University research showed that people raised in emotionally rejecting environments are more likely to choose similar relationships as adults, because the brain feels calmer with predictable discomfort than with unpredictable happiness. Surprisingly, true care can feel suspicious if you're used to coldness. This is explained by cognitive consistency. The brain strives to maintain an internal logical structure, even if it's flawed. As Lao Tzu said, people prefer old pain to new healing because it is already familiar. It's a paradox. We seek light but hold shadows in our hands because the shadow is an old friend. In it, we aren't afraid. We know how to behave there. And that's why the path to happiness isn't a walk in a garden. It's more like an inner revolution, a refusal of the old coordinate system. One striking neuropsychological case involves a woman named Diana. She suffered anxiety, intrusive thoughts, and insomnia. Neither medication nor endless therapy brought relief, until one doctor asked her, "Have you ever spent long periods in silence, just sitting without reading, thinking, or speaking?" It seemed strange. Silence? What could that change? He suggested she spend 10 minutes a day in absolute silence, not trying to control thoughts, but simply observing. By the second week, Diana experienced a powerful catharsis. She realized inside lived her mother's voice constantly criticizing her. But this voice had become so familiar she considered it her own. In silence, the voice surfaced, and she could separate it from herself. That was the start of her real healing. A brain freed from endless external noise can make astonishing breakthroughs. True insights are born not in chaos, but in silence. While we hear the world, we often do not hear ourselves. Yet it is ourselves we most often fail to recognize, because this voice is unlike any we are used to. Why does a child who experiences unstable love later choose unstable partners? Because the brain is not a philosopher, it's a cartographer. And if the survival map is written in chaos, it will seek chaos because only there does it feel at home. Harvard University conducted experiments with volunteers who had repeated trauma in their history. Researchers observed amygdala activity, the brain's fear center. It turned out that even positive stimuli triggered suspicion and anxiety in these people. Their neural network seemed to say, "This is too good to be true. Danger probably follows." That's why many pull away when relationships become too warm, why they reject closeness as it approaches, and why the brain, which seeks happiness, suddenly sounds an alarm when happiness is within reach. Thomas Metzinger, a prominent German philosopher and neuroscientist, writes in his book Being No One that consciousness is not a unified self, but a set of self-representations. We don't so much live as construct ourselves every second, and if this construction is based on fear, changing it will hurt. But it's exactly what is needed to move toward genuine joy. The brain resists change because change is uncertainty, but in uncertainty lies freedom. The old holds comfort, the new offers possibility. Only those brave enough to let go of the old pain structure can enter the space of new life. What can we do? Start small. Here are some practices. First, observe your automatisms. Try for one day to consciously notice what reactions, thoughts, and feelings repeat in the same situations. Where do you recognize pain as familiar? Second, practice silence. Spend at least 15 minutes in complete quiet. No phones, no talking, no music. Just be. You can watch water or fire. Listen for what arises from within. Third, write reflections. Note what phrases or judgments about yourself you heard in childhood. Which do you still carry today? Fourth, train slowing down. The brain fears happiness when it arrives too fast. Slow down in everything: eating, walking, responding. Let the new life come in drops. Then the brain can accept it. People go to therapists not to chase happiness, but because they cannot endure unhappiness anymore. Happiness is often a side effect of courage. The courage to leave the old self, the familiar fear, habitual tension, and learned helplessness. And yes, sometimes the path to happiness begins not with the desire for joy, but with refusal to repeat pain. If you find this journey meaningful, please subscribe to Grounded in Science, share this video with those who need it, and tell us in the comments, have you noticed your brain clinging to the familiar? How do you break free? There is a story about a scientist famous for his work on memory and perception. He recalled how, as a child, his family moved to a new country, and he couldn't sleep for several months, not from fear or loneliness, but from silence. In the old house surrounded by busy streets, he fell asleep to the hum of cars, barking dogs, and neighbors' shouts. But in the new, cozy, safe neighborhood, near silence reigned. His brain, accustomed to chaos, didn't know how to react to this new experience. It missed noise, not because noise was better, but because it was familiar. This is a key to understanding how our brain works. We may dream of happiness, peace, and new horizons, but the brain strives not for the best, but for what has been, for the predictable, even if it means pain. Earlier, we mentioned that people raised in emotionally unstable environments tend to enter adult relationships that repeat familiar patterns. They unconsciously choose partners who bring jealousy, rejection, or coldness, because their inner settings are not tuned to seek joy, but to recognize. The brain seems to say, "This is safe. I've been here. I know how to live with this." That's why change often causes anxiety, even positive change, even welcome change. The brain activates the amygdala, the fear and anxiety center, when faced with the unknown. Cortisol spikes, heart races, muscles tense. All this can happen when trying a new route to work, changing habits, or watching a movie shot in an unusual style. Ironically, this craving for the familiar blocks many from escaping cycles they are stuck in. Why does a person enduring humiliation at work not leave, even when there is an alternative? Why does one suffering inner emptiness avoid meditation and self-discovery, even knowing it could help? The answer is simple. Suffering is familiar, happiness is not. Philosopher Michel Foucault wrote that humans are animals caught in the trap of their own history. We carry scripts embedded in billions of neural connections, and every attempt to rewrite them feels like stepping over a chasm, even if light awaits on the other side. But rewriting is possible. Enter neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to change. Modern research shows that regular practice beyond comfort zones, mindfulness, therapy, and even simple body exercises like breathing techniques can build new connections and unlearn harmful automatisms. A simple but powerful tool is journaling. If each night you write down at least 3 situations where you acted out of your usual pattern, choosing calm over irritation, dialogue over withdrawal, you start changing your thinking structure. These rituals create records of new experiences the brain can use later. We teach it. It's safe to be different. Another famous example is Lauren, who suffered chronic anxiety. Her day began with a sense of doom, even when everything was calm. Through therapy, she started an observation journal. Every time her brain sent an alarm, she noted what triggered it and how things ended. After months, she saw that 9 out of 10 fears never came true. This simple statistic, collected by Lauren herself, became an anchor that helped her begin trusting reality rather than the scripts of her past. This is the power of awareness, the beginning of rewiring the brain. Neuroscientist Joe Dispenza famously said, "We are not victims of our genes or our past. We are creators of our neural pathways." While it requires effort, change is absolutely possible. Interestingly, many of the greatest minds in history consciously disrupted their patterns. Albert Einstein, when stuck on a problem, would change not only his perspective but also his environment, retreating to the mountains, sitting at a different desk, playing the violin. These were his ways of reprogramming his perception. Einstein said, "You cannot solve a problem on the same level of thinking that created it." Within each of us lives the longing for happiness, but the brain is a conservative by nature. It resists the new because its chief aim is survival, not flourishing. It clings to the old like an anchor, even when that anchor drags us down. But mindfulness is the key. When we notice, "I am walking the same old loop because it is familiar," we gain the chance to step out, because knowledge is already half of freedom. Imagine the brain as a city with countless roads and highways. Old roads are wide, well-lit, and heavily trafficked. They represent familiar patterns and behaviors. New paths are like narrow dirt trails through a dense forest, overgrown and uncertain. To travel these new paths requires courage and patience. Yet each step taken clears the way for others, until eventually the new path becomes the main highway. Sometimes it takes just one moment to forever change a person's trajectory. But that moment is almost always preceded by years of repeating the same patterns. The brain builds life routes like a navigator. If you choose the same way every day, it stops suggesting alternatives. But take one turn off that path, and it starts looking for new routes. A psychotherapist recounted the story of a patient trapped in an obsessive addiction to toxic relationships. She knew it was destructive. She suffered, cried, promised to stop, but kept coming back. Then one day, hearing the same words from her partner for the 100th time, she felt not pain but boredom. It was neither a breakdown, shock, nor epiphany, simply boredom. And that boredom became her point of freedom. She realized the scenario was not reality, but an old tape the brain kept on repeat. She stopped reacting to it. This is often how liberation begins. Not as a loud explosion, but as a slight shift, like suddenly noticing you are breathing and realizing you can breathe differently. The brain that clings to the familiar is not the enemy. It is a guardian standing at the gate. Its mission is to protect us. But the key to those gates is always inside. We can remind ourselves that anxiety about the new is not a danger sign, but a pay attention signal. We can notice that choosing the familiar is not the real me, but an automatism. And the more often we realize this, the more freedom we gain. Psychologists have noticed an intriguing phenomenon. When people are given a task to do one thing slightly differently each day, wash their face with the other hand, change the order of their morning routine, listen to new music, not only their mood improves, but levels of neurotrophins rise, supporting brain development. Even small changes like altering the commute route can literally awaken neural networks, spark creativity, and reduce anxiety. Philosopher Gregory Pomerantz wrote, "Fear of change is nothing other than fear of life, because life is change." And if we live always choosing the old, we essentially reject life in its fullness. But constant inner struggle is not the answer either. We cannot defeat the brain by ignoring its nature. We can only engage in dialogue with it. And in this dialogue, the main task is not to blame the brain for not wanting happiness, but to understand why it chooses what it does. Many spiritual and psychological practices don't advocate harshly abandoning old patterns. They teach first to see them. When we learn to observe our thoughts and reactions as if watching a movie, we gain the distance necessary for choice. If in a moment of irritation we don't shout but ask, "What exactly is reacting inside me now? Where have I felt this before?" we transform experience from automatic to conscious. We enter the very point where change is possible. Writer and philosopher Henry David Thoreau, who withdrew to the woods to rethink his life, said, "I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately, to live deep and suck out all the marrow of life. His experiment challenged not only society but his own brain, which, like ours, longed for comfort and habit. But it was in that solitude, in new sensations and unfamiliar actions that he found clarity. We don't have to go to the woods, but it is important to stop at least 10 minutes a day to ask ourselves, am I living because I chose to, or because I am repeating? One of the most powerful tools for rewiring thought patterns is meditation. It helps us see how the mind jumps from thought to thought, how the brain seeks familiarity, even in chaos. And in that silence, we begin to notice what used to escape us. We hear a voice behind the voices, and it often turns out to be more real than anything else. Let's take a moment to explore an unexpected fact. The brain's resistance to happiness is not just psychological, but biological. When we experience positive emotions, our brain releases neurotransmitters like dopamine and serotonin, which feel good. But these feel-good chemicals can also create imbalance if not regulated. The brain's ancient survival circuits sometimes interpret prolonged happiness as unusual or risky, a sign that something might be wrong. This phenomenon, known as the set point or hedonic adaptation, means we quickly return to a baseline emotional state, seeking familiar feelings again. In other words, happiness can be uncomfortable for the brain because it's unfamiliar. It's like a homeostatic thermostat trying to keep the system stable. This insight explains why change is so hard and why sustainable happiness requires rewiring and patience. Imagine trying to teach an old dog new tricks. The dog knows the old ones well. They bring safety and reward. New tricks require effort, patience, and sometimes frustration. But with consistent practice, the dog learns, and new behaviors become second nature. Our brain works the same way. Now here's an intriguing hypothesis that challenges common beliefs about happiness. Some neuroscientists suggest that our pursuit of constant happiness might be misguided. Instead, they propose that the brain is wired to seek meaning rather than mere pleasure. Meaning often involves discomfort, challenge, and growth, not just easy joy. This explains why people find deeper satisfaction in overcoming hardships, building relationships, and pursuing purpose, even if the path is sometimes painful. If this is true, then embracing discomfort as part of life's meaning is essential. Avoiding pain altogether may backfire because the brain craves the familiar emotional landscape, even if it includes suffering. So happiness isn't a constant sunny day, but a landscape with shadows and light, a dynamic balance. How can we use these insights practically to help our brain welcome the unfamiliar and, over time, choose joy? First, remember that change is gradual. The brain is not a computer you reboot once. It's more like a garden where new seeds must be planted, watered, and nurtured patiently. Rushing or forcing change often triggers resistance and relapse. Second, cultivate curiosity about your own mind. Ask questions like, what stories do I keep telling myself? What patterns feel familiar but no longer serve me? What new thought or action can I try today that feels just a little different? Third, build small rituals of kindness toward yourself. When anxiety or old patterns arise, treat yourself like a trusted friend rather than an enemy. This compassionate stance soothes the amygdala and creates a safe environment for change. Fourth, integrate body and mind practices. Yoga, breathwork, mindful walking. These help anchor new neural pathways by engaging the body's calming systems. When the body feels safe, the brain is more willing to explore new emotional terrain. Finally, share your journey. Talking with others, joining supportive communities, or simply writing about your experiences can solidify new learning and reduce isolation. Remember, you are not alone in this. Before we end, here's a call to action. If this video has sparked new understanding or inspired you to reflect on your own familiar patterns, please hit the like button. Subscribe to Grounded in Science for more fascinating explorations of the mind and brain. Share this video with someone who might benefit from knowing they can rewire their brain and rewrite their story. And leave a comment below. What pattern are you noticing today? How do you plan to step onto a new path? Your participation helps build a community of curious minds seeking truth and transformation. In closing, let's hold a big question in our hearts. If the brain's deepest goal is survival, how can we redefine survival to mean thriving, growing, and flourishing? Can we learn to welcome the unfamiliar, the uncertain, the new, not as threats but as gateways to deeper life? Our brains may be ancient sentinels guarding the gates, but inside each of us is a courageous explorer ready to open them. And that explorer is you. If you want more insights like these, don't forget to subscribe, share, and join the conversation. The journey to understanding the brain and transforming life is ongoing, and you're part of it. Thank you for watching Grounded in Science.